First up, it's Meshuggah and Immutable. It has been 5.5 years since the release of Meshuggah's last album, The Violent Sleep of Reason, a lengthy gap which saw us, last year, undertake our career-long retrospective on the evolution of Meshuggah that Alec was referring to not long ago, and we were wondering at the end there what shape the follow-up to that record might take. Obviously, from the fact that we did that, we all fucking love Meshuggah. I will say, as an overview, that what sometimes comes up with new Meshuggah reviews in the modern day is the fact that their sound has been so ripped off in a way for some people that can dilute their impact because Gent's fucking everywhere. For me, in the post-Gent years, which really is the albums they've released since Obzen, I find that so many of those bands don't really do anything for me, and no one has done the exact thing that Meshuggah do that I love, that it actually makes them stand out, and it makes what they get right for me even more apparent. It can take a bit of a trip of hindsight to really understand what they were going for when they invented this sound. Like when we spoke about Nothing on the special and the pioneering usage of the 8-string guitars there, and we were like, this album's called Nothing. It's aiming to be darker and more empty and suffocating as an album, using those low-end sounds, not just gent groove sound cool. And that's the kind of, I guess, context I like to keep in mind with those kind of things. But as they have gotten rarer and rarer, I do value Meshuggah albums in the modern day for that reason. Not necessarily a massive advancement, but a reminder of what it is that Meshuggah do the best.
Yeah. I think the thing is that they have changed the game like several times now, and as soon as they did Obzen, like you're saying, with the whole like gent boom and things like in the wake of that, as soon as they did that, the next thing they did, Kolos, they went where other bands couldn't follow. Like nobody else is doing what Meshuggah actually do now, as in they're exploring that more like organic raw sound, which I guess we'll kind of dig into and stuff, but like bands copying Meshuggah aren't copying like The Violent Sleep of Reason. They're trying to copy Obzen or Destroy Erase Approve or Nothing. They're not trying to copy what Meshuggah are doing now because they can't.
Well, this album, like The Violent Sleep of Reason did, has split people in a way that prior to that we weren't really used to seeing Meshuggah albums do. There are those who fucking love it and hail it as another slam dunk from one of the most innovative metal bands of all time, and there are those who are viewing it as another step in the increasing slowing down and creative stagnation of Meshuggah. Those are two pillars that are very much held in the fan base on this record. I think for us, this is interesting because we did that special, and the Violent Sleep of Reason chat that we had there, looking at that album 5 years after its release, was quite interesting, I think, in that we tried to distance ourselves from the massive expectations that Meshuggah had going into that record, and we all kind of came to the conclusion that, yeah, it's not our favourite Meshuggah album, but we can kind of understand its values and where it sits a bit more. And with that discussion clearing the table really well for Immutable, how is this stepping into that position?
I mean, I think what you're saying about people thinking, oh, it's not a big leap. It's, they're slowing down, creative stagnation and stuff. I do get why you might think that, but at the same time, when Tool come out with something basically since Lateralis, it's not really been that much new stuff, but the defense has been they already changed the game. You can't whip them for just doing what they do. And Meshuggah are like, I don't think it's devoid of ideas. I think it's their thing that they do so well, and people are almost like, because that sound has been so saturated by gent. When you hear Meshuggah now, maybe you might think, oh, well, it just sounds like that other stuff, but without, I don't know, someone doing clean vocals over it, or a big whoop like drop over it, or whatever someone decides to ruin it with. But yeah, I don't know. I get why people might think that, but I don't agree with it.
So, like, my defense is that, like, as we have said, Meshuggah changed the game so many times, and how many bands now, like, approaching 30 years into their career, continue to change the game? Like, you just, with all those older bands, you don't hold them to that standard anymore because bands do grow old. So I think it's, I get why people do it with Meshuggah, because they were that significant, but like they've chosen him several times. They like deserve to kind of just now like settle in and do the Meshuggah thing that they are really good at. I do think that is valid, and I get why people might think it's a bit stale. I personally like my feelings on this album are very, very mixed. Like we'll get into like this album does some things brilliantly, it does some things that I kind of hate. So like I'm kind of all over the place on this record, which I'm sure we'll get into across the chat. But I do think like complaining that Meshuggah are getting stale, like maybe a little bit, but other bands have kind of got into this position as well. And we give them a free pass. So why don't we give Meshuggah a free pass?
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose we could try and sum up that, legacy element or whatever at the end of this, but just in terms of like, here's a new Meshuggah album, how much do you like it? I think I'm with you, Sam, in that I like a lot of this. It's Meshuggah. I think there's a lot of this that is fucking great. But
there's just a lot. Emphasis on the lot.
There is, and there are. I have other feelings about it as well. Alec, you love this album, right?
Yeah, I fucking love it. I think it's brilliant. I think it's probably my 4th favourite Meshuggah album. Yeah, I get what you mean, Sam. There is a lot of it, but I've not had any Meshuggah for like 6 years. I'm fine having a lot of it.
I mean, we did have a lot of Meshuggah last year, in fairness.
We did have a lot. I did actually have to give Meshuggah a rest, actually. But yeah, no, it's like I never got bored. I think it flows really well. I think how it's broken up into chunks, kind of like from Broken Cog to They Move Below, and then from there to Black Cathedral, I think it's split quite neatly into 3 passages. Not like Catch 33, where it's like, oh, it's a big long song, but I think approaching it like that, or like that's how I processed it. It was pleasant. Pleasant's maybe not the right word, but I really enjoyed just sitting down and just getting lost in a Meshuggah record for like 70 minutes.
I do agree with that whole thing of it being there are like movements to this album. There is like the first batch of songs up to They Move Below. I think that run is brilliant. I think like that is classic Meshuggah, just crushing your skull, and it's so good. It's the middle part of the album that is where I kind of lose it. But there is like there's still a lot going on, and like I don't want to go straight in on saying that like that one song just shouldn't exist because I hate it. But
well, I agree that obviously they've clearly sequenced it in a purposeful way. I don't necessarily, I don't agree with either you exactly, seemingly in terms of like where it falls off or whatever. I think when we did the Meshuggah special, it's like that catalogue has so many actual classics in it. Like it's literally about 3/4 fucking classic records. And like Alec, it's fascinating to me that you would like put this above a lot of those, because I'll be honest, I flat out don't understand it. Like in terms of listening to the album, it's like you've heard something that I haven't. And in a way, that's interesting to me because I'm well established in my extreme adoration of Colossus, and how people must feel when I say Colossus is Meshuggah's best album must be similar to how I feel when I see you saying that this is better than like half of Meshuggah's established classic records. Where it's just like, how? But the immediate thing to say is the base satisfaction of listening to Meshuggah. I got that here, fucking plenty of it. They haven't jumped the shark or anything. They haven't let themselves down. When I say that no one else hits what Meshuggah do in this style of music, is the hulking, unfeeling, satanic grinding machine that is Meshuggah. It's here, and indeed the weight plays into this as well, because some people might feel that after nearly 6 years they will want more to really justify that time, or you might feel that it's been so long that it's just gratifying, as you've said, Alec, to just get Meshuggah back again. I probably do fall a little bit more into the latter in terms of what I'm, I guess, expecting from Meshuggah. I can't believe how cartoonishly obnoxious this starts. Like, not even note variation at the start there. Literally one note just slapping you for like an entire minute in the central riff.
Like,
Broken Cog is such a good opener. Like that was when that happened, I was like, oh, here we go. It's happening. Just battering you round the head. And just sounding huge in doing so. It is like this giant, colossal being again. And even when it's not got the screams, it's just like the spoken word vocal. It just sounds evil and menacing and like it's going to destroy you.
I always found that weird that like because Thomas does the spoken word. It's like does Jens's speaking voice just sound like Nardwar or something? Is that why he doesn't do it?
I really like when you get the first time you hear Jens's full roar is 4.5 minutes in. At that point, it feels like incredibly earned and gratifying at that point to hear him open his mouth like that.
And you've already had to wait 3 minutes for the bass for
the riff to properly open up.
Riff,
Yeah,
like when that came in, I went like proper like the Jonah Hill like excited.
It's no one does it like
gif.
Meshuggah in that's one of those moments where you can just Meshuggah do this better than everyone else. It is like a magic moment that you can only get from this band.
Yeah. Again, as soon as that kicked in, I was just sold. Like, cause like that first 3 minutes, I was like, "Oh, it's coming!" And as soon as that riff came in, I was like, "Yep, no, that's me. I'm done." Like, oh yes,
it's a cool start to an album in terms of like gradually ramping up, and it really kicks into gear for me with the Abysmal Eye, which we had as the single, but like having it as track 2 there after that, that letting the elasticity ramp up from Broken Cog, fantastic.
Yeah, Abysmal Eye just like ups the pace. You get the full polyrhythmic madness. You're right with the elasticity of the riff. Jen's vocals just locking in with the groove. You got little flourishes on the riff every now and then, which are really fun and like.
Yeah,
cool.
it's where you really start to feel like, oh fuck, my whole body is being swept up in this. Which that kind of like animalistic, tribalistic, primal movement side of Meshuggah is really important to actually enjoying them. And that riff with the double bass pattern that slides back and forth in the verses, it's like it's seasick. Like that's the fucking money there. You get locked in so well, and when that riff shift comes in the last minute to like pure groove, it's like, Jesus, my entire center of being has shifted. And in terms of sequencing, again, the transition from there into like the shortening fuse is immaculate.
Yeah, and it's one of those things as well. Like on the special, we were talking about how Kolos and Violent Sleep of Reason. It's that more like it's less. If I say clinical, you know what I mean.
It's more earthy, less mechanical. Yeah.
But if you compare this to Kolos, like Kolos sounds like Nine Inch Nails or something. Like this sounds so like muddy compared to that record, which I hadn't really thought about, but then I just went back and listened to Kolos, and it's like it's so apparent how further down the rabbit hole they've kind of just dug themselves.
Yeah, I think Kolos is a sweet spot for that. I think here actually the production kind of loses some of the harsher edges. It gets kind of muddied so much that it's kind of it loses some of the razor edge. But on what's the song there? Just fucking
Like the Shortening
Fuse. That's the one. How that song just fucking batters that central groove into you, so like unrelentingly and constantly. But it introduces those little like riff alterations and extra notes and stuff to move you along while gluing you to the spot simultaneously. That's the kind of shit that Meshuggah is made of, until finally some sense of relief and a melodic break. The following songs, they move in that big chunky sequence like that. It's pretty much a half an hour segment of that kind of Meshuggah, which for some people very much might be where some of the problems do begin. In terms of that sequencing element, They Move Below is the first moment after that just like brutishly unforgiving first half where you can pause and bring yourself back together, and they do something different. It's an instrumental that follows the Break Those Bones that Sinews gave it motion lead of structuring, which is, I will use this moment to remind you, one of heavy metal's most underappreciated masterpiece songs. But space and then slithering crunch. I really like it, and I'm glad it's here. It should have at least 2 minutes shaved off it.
This is my problem. I would say even more than that. I was like, this is really cool, and then by the time we were about 5-6 minutes in, I was like, oh, this is actually putting me to sleep now.
Well, that opening passage is not interesting enough to maintain it for so long, and the fact that it's an instrumental kind of exacerbates the issue.
Like that's the thing, but the thing is, I think that opening passage was cool because it was a breather. It was this like break, but it goes on too long, and then like it does get heavier. And I was like, okay, but now it's just kind of like more of the same, just the Meshuggah riff, and that's the song that just completely takes me out of this album for a little while. This is hardly shocking that I don't like the 9-minute instrumental, but it really does just, for an album that is too long anyway, having a 9-minute, like even like there is still stuff I would shave off this album without shaving, like as well as the 9-minute instrumental, but it is just too much at this point, like right in the middle of the album, and just kills the momentum.
See, I feel like that I've become a caricature of a Meshuggah fan. I forget that it's an instrumental. I find it so engaging, that song. I think that the kind of the intro you're talking about, I love that. It's almost a bit like Tool-esque, which I think only seems fair given that Tool ripped them off 16 years ago anyway. And then again, you do get that unmistakable Meshuggah groove. You get those guitar harmonies that sound like alarms going off. Honestly, I'm locked into that. I forgot it was 9 minutes until I had to just make some notes about it. I was like, oh yeah, it's like 9 minutes long.
Yeah, I think They Move Below is a really valuable part of the album. If Sam, you're saying at the point that it takes you out or whatever, I think some of that half an hour block at the start starts off so well, and by the last few of it's wearing, and I think They Move Below is a really important reset point.
I get that.
I think it absolutely it does that. I do just think it should have a few minutes shaved off it. Its point in the album is still vital. In general, basically, I feel Meshuggah perfected that song when they wrote it in 2012 as track 7 on Kolos, and a longer instrumental feel variation isn't so hard-hitting, even though it is one of the most unique standouts, where it's one of the ones on this where you'll remember which song that is on this album. The fact that there are 3 instrumentals on this album, not necessary.
I mean, I think this is it. It's a combination of other factors, but They Move Below is the one that I go to, because I'd agree, having that instrumental there in the album after that opening run, it does work. I just was like, have it be a 3-4-minute instrumental that does everything They Move Below does in a more condensed time, and I'd be like, that's great, that's really good. It's kind of like reset album and kind of moves into the next part, but it just goes on for me, and I was just like, there is just not enough happening in this 9 minutes to really justify the length, and I think that's just because I just find myself just losing interest at that point. It slams the brakes so hard for me. It takes a few songs to then get back into the swing of things.
I do quite like that in the press this week they've come out saying that they originally wanted to make this like Rain in Blood, and it's like They Move Below is like almost side A of Rain in Blood.
Which I hope they've still got that in them at some point. That would be awesome. The most genuinely new thing on this record is Black Cathedral, which utilizes a evil as fuck, malevolent as hell tremolo idea that flirts with other kinds of extreme metal. Like there is a black metal feeling going on. The tremolo picking combined with such a low guttural tone as well made me think of Portal of all bands.
Yeah.
Which is why it's such a crying shame that it gets kept as a 2-minute interlude that never really develops and never even gets percussion in behind it, rather than having that really cool idea developed fully into a cool, unique Meshuggah song.
Yeah, I agree. Like that is a shame, because it is. I was kind of like, oh, this is it, and that's when I'd almost say I would have extended out and done more with, as opposed to
that should be a song. It's the freshest thing on the record, and it just has its wings clipped before it can take off. I Am That Thirst does bring in a little bit of that in the aftermath, which is why that's another of the best songs on the record.
Yeah.
But it feels like a baby step there, where Black Cathedral felt it had like a lot more potential that isn't realised.
Yeah, I get that, but yeah, that's it really. I get no. I have nothing to say, because I fucking love it. Like, I heard Black Cathedral, I was like, oh fucking yeah, 2 minutes of that's cool. Maybe they'll do something more next time.
Yeah, I think it's a promising part of the record. It's just frustrating that that's all it is when you do have a 67-minute record that is so often returning to much more well-trodden ideas. I think, again, They Move Below acts as a really good reset, and then following up, I think, with one of the most obvious crowd-pleasing songs on the record, Kaleidoscope. Good move. That's one where you can imagine that, being played in the live environment and getting a roar from the audience as that first riff comes in, like Stenger style or something. I can't imagine that for a good amount of the tracks on this record. That just instantaneous approval. Like, every song is still based on a really cool rhythmic idea. Like, can you imagine that not being the case for Meshuggah? So back in that that earlier run, Phantoms, the kind of weird unsettled twitchiness of it, and then the second half, the low 8-string part, which when it came in I literally went, oh, hello nothing. God He Sees in Mirrors, where they go, we weren't using the really low-end 8 strings when we wrote the New Millennium Cyanide Christ riff. Let's have a crack at that, where we swap the kind of manic energy of Chaosphere for just dirt. obviously it's full of kind of just like interesting variations and kind of different ways of going at the base Meshuggah kind of template. I'm not sure they evolve them consistency and give them all their own identity as songs the way, say, Kolos does. And I think the cooling of responses towards Meshuggah goes back a decade now, becoming more felt each time. Don't believe anyone who tells you that Kolos is where Meshuggah start to get boring. Those people are fools and they are charlatans. I do think Kolos is kind of the last major new idea that this band had. The shift from Obzen into that more organic, slimier and alien sound for the ultimate mechanical band, we have in the decade since then. They've gone down it further, sure, but it's minutiae and they have sounded a lot more comfy. And when people say that they've been doing the same thing for 30 years or whatever, actually listen to yourselves. Like, if
it's
you
not true.
If you follow Meshuggah's first 7 albums the way we did on our special, the different ways that they approach each one, from fucking Chaosphere into Nothing to Catch 33 to Obzen, fucking unbelievable. Kolos now feels like their last real swing.
Yeah.
I think if they did another album that was just more of this, I think that is the point where maybe I would get bored. I think, and again, like recently in the press, Morten from the band, he's come out saying that he thinks this is their most dynamic record. I mean, I don't know if he's trolling, but because again, I don't know if he just equates a few ideas not being kind of developed, like
or just having lots of songs.
Yeah. It's like, it's longer, so it must be more dynamic. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't think that's true. But I was happy for Meshuggah to keep going down this road. But now at this point, I think I'm now at that point where if I get another one of this, I'll be like, well, did I need that? I felt I needed this. I think it's fucking great.
That's fair enough in terms of like I have felt that same position on some other bands' records. Like in terms of the most dynamic or whatever, it's literally an album that has a half an hour like slog at the start of kind of the same thing before having a reset point. Like the track to track variation. Again, just objectively, put it next to Kolos, put it next to Obzen. It is not the same. I think when you look at something like that, and then again how it settles in again, like post They Move Below or whatever, the riffs are too samey across the board, and ligature marks, stuff like that, feels quite sedate. It feels like there are more songs here where they pretty much ride like a note or two for bloody ages, and where the best Meshuggah songs in that vein build tension waiting for it to snap. This feels more like we do it for a certain amount of time and then change because we've done it for a while. I'm not sure they evolve them so consistently, and instead I think this album does sound easily the most settled out of anything Meshuggah have done. The tempo changes are more relaxed, the slowed down rhythms even more so from Violet Sleep of Reason, and they just don't make for the greatest songs of their career.
No, I think that is like how I feel. Like, I am fine with that, like, so that first half hour run of just Meshuggah-ing, because it's just kind of like, we haven't had a new album with Meshuggah doing it in so long that I think I was just kind of like, yeah, cool, I'm down for this. And I think, like, it does ride that groove for too long. And I think, like, when people say about like them being bad from Kolos, it's like because Obzen is such a like natural peak for them that Kolos being still on, loads of people are going to latch onto that. But like when Obzen is like the peak for them, it's 52 minutes long. No Meshuggah album needs to be longer than Obzen, and yet they've got longer every time. And I'm just like, you're going the wrong way with this. You just like, and they're getting longer without adding more ideas. It's kind of just drawing out the same ideas, I think, which is what like the problem a lot of this album runs into, is that everything just feels that, as you said, they ride out a riff for too long or something like that, and it just all feels a bit drawn out to the point like where it's like you are stretching the formula to its breaking point. And because I kind of felt that way about Violence of Revolution when it came out, I have warmed to that album a lot. And again, I think when this album came out, I was kind of just like, and I saw a lot of the reactions below, I was like, oh, so everyone's now deciding that. And I was just like, I get it, but I think a lot of people are just ignoring the things that this album does well because it's just too much of like, this is the first Meshuggah album where there's really noticeable missteps, I guess.
I think your point about it, getting longer and longer without adding the largest amount of new ideas, I think that's certainly true for Immutable. Part of it is The rhythm section wrote pretty much all of this. Morton as the rhythm guitarist, Frederick has not really been involved because he's not really been present in the band for like the last half a decade now.
Yeah.
There's like a couple of songs that have his solos, and they feel pretty samey when they come in. So the melodic sense of this band, which obviously isn't the most important part of what they do, but it has been a factor, it isn't here so much. And instead, the focus feels like it is really on just like the lowest end of an 8-string, just pounding on you for really long periods of time without much variation. It's pretty amazing that they've never exceeded an hour before this, and it's maybe a sign of letting things slip just a bit that this is the album they decide to break that barrier with, which has a far lower amount of ideas than many of their best records do. Again, just like which one of these albums out of, even just compare this to Violent Sleep of Reason, which got fucking Clockworks, Monstro City, like memorable songs that will be live staples. I do think even as you're going on, like the Faultless at track 11 has a fucking incredible riff that far into the album, first time, made me sit up and go, whoa, this band are just the fucking heaviest. And it's
that little back end where it's I'm the First, the Faultless, and Armies of the Preposterous. I mean, that saves the album from being a total like bust
Armies
for me in the back half. Like that run of 3 songs is great, and that for me is like the saving grace of the back half of this album.
Well, the Faultless, that's a riff that a billion bands would kill to write, and they wouldn't leave it until track 11 on their 9th record. And then it turns into Triptychon briefly. Like, at the end of the Faultless, when that huge, low, goth voice, like, it sounds so much like Triptychon in such an unexpected source that it was genuinely alarming for me. But that's fucking rad, and it's still, that far into the record, like, I was getting, oh, that's cool, that's got me in. It's just imagining a hypothetical alternate version of this album that exists with a lot of the same material, but with the problems ironed out. There is a much better album in here than the one that is in front of us.
Yeah, I think that is largely how I feel. It's trim down the length, like just I don't know if you need to cut songs, maybe just cut song lengths down or something like that. Like, but
I think there's a few songs you could cut, and I think there are a couple other songs that Black Cathedral should be made into a song, and something that they move below still holds a valuable key in the record's runtime, but it should be just kind of condensed a little bit. I feel pretty comfortable, which again, it's so funny to have you come in at such a different angle, Alec. I feel pretty comfortable in saying this is Meshuggah's worst album. Like,
what?
There are
worse than the debut.
Yeah, that's a really interesting kind of thrash record where this sounds like a band milking a thing for so long. There are 6 albums that are light years ahead of this, like actual classic records that like this does not come close to, and there are 2 that I think are better and more unique. And Violent Sleep of Reason, when we did that chat, we were like, okay, this clearly isn't hitting in the same way as all of the fucking 10s that have come previously are. Why? Let's actually try and figure out the reasons here. And we came up with like, here are the niggling things that make this just a really great record instead of one that has us all taking our shirts off and swinging them around our heads in really weird timings. This, I don't think you need to do that kind of picking apart with. The problems are just much more apparent. Like, it's too samey, it's too long, it's not as energetic. There are ideas that are relegated to side status and not explored as well as they could be. There are even less new ideas than the Violent Sleep of Reason had, because that had the sludge amp stuff of Into the Decay. It had the Vangelisy part that comes out at the end of Stifled. Like, there are more new ideas on that record than there are on this one. So I think this record makes Violent Sleep of Reason look good the way that made Colossus look good for some people.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing as well. I can't actually disagree with any of these points that you're both making, because they are really good points. I just
don't feel it, and that's fine. Yeah.
I think that's the thing. Like, I can offer no like critical riposte to that because it makes sense, but nah.
I think it's fair enough. I want to love Meshuggah albums. They're one of those bands that I think like you want to love them because they, like I said, they are one of the most important metal bands of like the last 30 years, and so you want to love everything they do. And like I say, if they want to just settle in and do this now, then fine. Like, they can, because they've changed the game too many times. You can't keep expecting it of them.
That's it. Like, I've just said this is Meshuggah's worst album, which I genuinely like. I have conviction in that belief. I think that is true. The other side, I got my fill of Meshuggah, and Meshuggah are more years into their career than Megadeth were when they put out Super Collider. Not even Risk, but Super Collider. The flop after the comeback era from the first flop. And Meshuggah, that many years in, are still having people like not really able to come to terms with the fact that they are not wholly innovative anymore, because it's still that like fresh and unusual a concept for that to be true. Like, that is some going.
Yeah, I think that's it. Is the fact that we still expect to ban this throne to be the innovators, the game changers they were. It's just it like, and like bands set the bar for themselves, I guess. But I do think it's a slightly unfair bar to hold Meshuggah to now. Like, they can't. How many more times can they change the game? And if this album ironed out a few of the issues that we've discussed and was just kind of Meshuggah doing that, I think people would actually be like, hey, this is just Meshuggah doing what they're great at, and I think people would be more okay with it. It's that, but with the first Meshuggah where there's some like glaring faults, I guess, is why people have come down really hard. Some people have come down really hard.
Yeah. I think, again, when we did our special, we were like, The Violent Sleep of Reason is the first album that has niggling problems as opposed to like just being like, wow, amazing. You're right. This is the first Meshuggah album that has like legit fucking issues. Still very good.
Yeah. I was a bit like, my feelings of Sam have kind of like changed, because like when I put it on, I really liked it and then got bored. As I've lived with it again, I found more I like. So I've kind of warmed to it a little bit again, as I think you tend to do with Meshuggah albums. But like it's not a disaster. Like I think I've seen some people say it is.
Terrible album to listen to when you're going on a run, though. I found that out the hard way. But
Can't get your rhythm going.
Yeah, no. I honestly, I get everything you're saying. And I also do get that thing as well, that unless you're like Michael Gerard or Tom G. Warrior or something, what else can you do to reinvent something you've already invented several and then like redefine several times? Like, it's an unfair expectation for most bands, and I think going into like their ninth album, right?
Yeah.
Expecting that, I think you are going to be disappointed.
Yeah, my expectations are not that. My expectations are just write good Meshuggah records now, like in that style. I think Immutable is a good one. It is a very, very flawed one. I would like them to do things, do that thing in a more consistent, more efficient, just a better rounded version of what we have on Immutable. I still went, like, as I was, like, they are very good bands to just listen to playing together, Meshuggah, and I would like that in that kind of form. As I was writing for my note for this, I still went, I should buy my ticket for the tour. I'm really excited to see them. So it's clearly not deflating my love and respect for them. That, I think, is our judgment on Immutable.